think the thing that would create an oil crisis is if people, the quickest thing to do that, and there are a number of economists who have studied this in some great detail, and one of my bigger learnings and continuing readings is on the issue of environmental impacts from energy, CO2 particularly, because I think we are having a virtual reality hoisted on us as a world at this point, which we've got to be very careful about. I actually think that one of the things that could lead to that crisis is a CO2 action on the part of all of the governments of the world to say you've just got to stop consuming this much, and defining global warming as being caused by man-made emissions of CO2. It just so happens that I'm a business where we've dealt with global cycles on climate change for millennia, hundreds of millions of years. And we personally don't buy the notion, because long before Mercedes were burning gas, there was cold and hot periods. We don't particularly buy the notion that only man-made emissions of CO2 are what are driving global climate change. We actually don't think it's helpful. But there's a number of studies that say that actually global warming precedes CO2 emissions, because things like CO2 come out of the ocean, for example. So one thing we've got to be very careful of is not to create knee-jerk policy reactions that will actually put us into a position of crises when market forces could otherwise have determined a lot of that. In other words, if you and I were paying twice as much for gasoline, I'll bet you we consume a hell of a lot less gasoline. And so one of the things that happens by nature of supply and demand being allowed to work is that you actually do have forces in human behavior that start changing behaviors and therefore help that equation itself.